The giant crystal room was full of noise and fear. Captain Lee Min-ho sat in his chair and watched dozens of alien creatures panic like scared children. The holographic screen in the middle of the room showed 3 massive black ships moving toward a peaceful mining world called Kepler 442b. 2 million people lived on that world, and they had no idea death was coming for them. The aliens in the Galactic Council were doing what they always did when trouble came. They talked and talked and talked. The blue-skinned Altarians wanted to write a letter telling the attackers to go away. The bug-like Zentaurians said they needed to study the problem first. The gas cloud creatures called nebuloids thought they should offer the attackers some gifts to make them happy. Lee Min-ho shook his head as he watched this circus. He was the captain of a human ship called Soul's Pride, and he had seen this same stupid dance many times before. While aliens argued about what forms to fill out, people died. It made him sick to his stomach. Lieutenant Park Ji-won sat at her weapons control station. Her fingers drummed on the metal surface as she watched the enemy ships get closer to the mining world. She was young, but she had already fought in 2 space battles. Most aliens her age were still in school learning how to write proper reports. Park Ji-won knew how to kill pirates. The mining world had families from 12 different alien species living there. They had children playing in parks and workers, digging valuable metals from deep underground. They had no weapons bigger than small police guns. The 3 black ships coming toward them had enough firepower to turn the entire world into burning dust. High Counselor Vash of the Altarian Federation stood up in his floating pod. He was old, even by alien standards, and his blue skin had turned pale with age. His voice was soft and shaky when he spoke. "We must follow proper procedures." He said we cannot simply act without forming the appropriate. Committee's ambassador, Kim Soo-young, rolled her eyes. She was the human representative to the Galactic Council, and she had spent 5 years trying to understand why aliens made everything so complicated. She stood up in the human pod, and her voice cut through the noise like a sharp knife. "Those people will be dead before your committees even have their first meeting," she said. The other aliens gasped and made shocked noises. Some of them had never heard anyone speak so directly to the High. Counselor Kim Soo-young did not care about their hurt feelings. "The Crimson Fleet does not negotiate." Kim Soo-young continued, "They are pirates and murderers. They take what they want and kill anyone who gets in their way, while you debate what color. Paper to use for your forms. They will be burning that world. A creature that looked like a walking tree raised one of its branch arms, but the proper channels must be followed," it said in a voice like wind through leaves. "We have procedures for a reason. These rules keep the peace." What peace? Lee Min-ho thought as he listened to this nonsense. The peace where pirates raid helpless worlds, while the Galactic Council writes strongly worded letters. The peace where millions of innocent people die, because no one wants to act without permission. The enemy ships were getting closer. The mining world had sent out emergency signals, begging for help. Their defense coordinator was an old Altarian named Vel SSH, who had spent 40 years following every rule in the book. Now those rules were going to get his people killed. Lieutenant Park Ji-won turned to her captain. "Sir, the enemy will reach firing range in 6 hours. If we leave now, we can intercept them before they attack the colony." Lee Min-ho nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. The debate in the council chamber was getting louder. Now the aliens were arguing about which committee should handle the crisis. The Defense Planning Committee wanted to study the attackers. The Diplomatic Relations Committee wanted to try talking to them. The Emergency Response Committee was still trying to figure out if this counted as an emergency. Kim Soo-young watched this madness and felt her patience disappear. These creatures had built a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds. They had technology that could move faster than light and computers that could think like gods. But when real trouble came, they turned into frightened children hiding behind paperwork. Captain Lee Min-ho made his decision. He stood up and walked toward the exit of the council chamber. Every alien eye followed him as he moved. His boots made sharp sounds on the crystal floor that echoed through the giant room. "Where are you going?" demanded. "High Counselor Vash, you cannot leave during an emergency session." Lee Minho stopped and turned back to face the assembled aliens. "To save those people," he said simply. "While you argue about proper procedures, real human beings are about to die. I will not let that happen, but you have no authority to act," protested a Zentorian whose insect eyes glittered with panic. "You must wait for council approval. You must follow the chain of command, Lee." Minho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The chain of command ends with me, when innocent lives are at stake. I am the highest-ranking human military officer in this sector. That gives me all the authority. I need Lieutenant Park." Jiwon was already gathering her equipment. She had been waiting for this moment. These aliens could spend months debating whether to help, but humans did not work that way. When someone needed help, you helped them. It was that simple. Ambassador Kim Soo-young stood up again. "With respect to this council, we are taking action now," she announced. "The human fleet will engage the Crimson Fleet and protect the mining colony. You can file whatever complaints you want after the shooting stops." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens were shouting in dozens of different languages. The translator. Computers could barely keep up with all the protests and objections. Some species threatened to leave the council. Others demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Lee Minho ignored all of it. He had heard similar threats before. Usually they came from species who had never fought a real war, never seen what pirates did to helpless worlds. These aliens lived in a fantasy where everything could be solved with the right paperwork and enough committee meetings. The mining world did not have time for fantasies. It had 6 hours before the Crimson Fleet arrived with death and destruction. The human fleet was small, only 12 ships against the pirates, 3 massive vessels. But size did not always matter. Speed mattered, determination mattered. The willingness to fight mattered most of all. Lieutenant Park. Jiwon followed her captain out of the council chamber. Behind them, the aliens continued their endless debate about proper procedures and authorization protocols. Ahead of them was a battle that would either save 2 million lives or add 12 human ships to the casualty list. As they walked toward their ship, Lee Minho thought about the galaxy they lived in. It was a place where good people died while committees decided whether helping them was politically convenient. It was a civilization so afraid of making mistakes that it refused to act even when action was desperately needed, but humans were different. They had not built their culture around avoiding mistakes. They had built it around doing what was right, even when it was dangerous or unpopular. Even when it broke every rule in the book. The Soul's Pride was waiting for them in the docking bay. Its engines were already warming up for the jump to hyperspace. The crew had been listening to the council debate, and they knew what was coming. They were ready for war, Lee. Minho settled into his captain's chair and opened a communication channel to the other human ships in the sector. "All vessels, this is Captain Lee Minho," he said. "We have a situation at Kepler 442b civilian population under threat from Crimson Fleet pirates, ETA 6 hours. The responses came back immediately. 11 other captains confirming they were ready to fight. None of them asked for permission. None of them demanded authorization from the council. They simply acknowledged the mission and began moving toward the battle. This was what made humans dangerous in the eyes of the galaxy. They did not wait for orders when lives were at stake. They saw what needed to be done, and they did it. The consequences could be sorted out later, after the innocent people were safe. The Soul's Pride jumped to hyperspace, followed by 11 other human warships. They left behind a council chamber, full of shocked aliens who were still trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time in galactic history, someone had acted without permission. The war was about to begin. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like angry hornets emerging from a disturbed nest. 12 ships against 3. But Admiral Choi Dae-sung was not worried about the numbers. He had fought pirates before, and he knew their weakness. They expected fear. They expected negotiation. They expected their enemies to follow the galactic rules of warfare. The pirates were about to learn that humans had never been good at following rules. Admiral Choi stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Incheon Thunder, and watched the enemy ships on his tactical display. The 3 pirate vessels were massive things built for intimidation and destruction. Each one was twice the size of his largest ship and carried enough weapons to level a city captain. Song Tae-hyung commanded the destroyer Busan Lightning, and his voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, the pirates are hailing us." "They want to negotiate?" Choi almost laughed. The Crimson Fleet always tried this trick first. They would demand tribute, or threaten to attack while their enemies wasted time talking. It was a strategy that worked on most galactic species who preferred words to weapons. Ignore them. Choi ordered, "All ships attack formation Delta. No warnings, no challenges, no mercy. Human fleet spread out like a pack of wolves surrounding their prey." Commander. Oh Na-young led her fighter squadron through the asteroid field that surrounded the mining world. Her 24 pilots were young and eager and completely willing to die for people they had never met. The pirates finally realized that something was wrong. The human ships were not slowing down for negotiations. They were not broadcasting surrender demands or challenge protocols. They were simply moving into attack positions with deadly efficiency. The Crimson Fleet commander was a creature called Vex Karoth, who had terrorized this sector for 15 years. He had 6 arms and enough cybernetic implants to make him more machine than flesh. His laugh sounded like grinding metal when he saw the small human force approaching. "These fools think they can threaten us," he said to his bridge crew. "They have not even demanded our surrender. How do they expect us to know they are serious?" His tactical officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes, pointed at the display. "Sir, their weapon systems are powering up, all of them. They appear to be preparing for immediate combat." Vex Karoth stopped laughing. Immediate combat was impossible in galactic warfare. There were rules to follow, challenges to issue, honor codes to respect. Even pirates followed some basic protocols when engaging enemy forces. "Open a channel to the human admiral," he ordered. "These barbarians need to learn proper procedure." Admiral Choi received the communication request and deleted it without reading. He had no interest in what pirates had to say. The mining colony was sending desperate pleas for help. 2 million civilians were counting on him to act. Lieutenant Colonel Park Hye-rim commanded the Marine Battalion aboard the Soul's Pride. She was checking her weapons and armor when the attack began. Her soldiers were ready for boarding actions against the pirate ships. They had trained for months in zero-gravity combat and close quarters fighting. The first human attack came without warning. Commander Oh Na-young dove her fighter squadron straight at the largest pirate ship. Her pilots fired missiles and plasma cannons in perfect coordination. The pirates' shields flared and sparked. "Under the assault! This is impossible!" Vex Karoth screamed as his ship shook from the impacts. "They attacked without issuing a formal challenge, without giving us time to respond. This violates every rule of civilized warfare." His weapons officer was frantically trying to target the human fighters, but they moved like nothing he had ever seen. They did not fly in the careful formations that military academies taught. Instead, they swarmed like insects, attacking from every direction at once. Captain Lee Min-ho brought the Soul's Pride in close to the second pirate ship. His crew had been together for 3 years, and they worked like a single organism. The gunners fired in perfect timing while the helmsman danced through the enemy fire. The pirates finally began shooting back, but their response was confused and uncoordinated. They had expected negotiations. They had expected time to prepare. They had not expected humans to simply start killing them without any warning. The Crimson Fleet had raided dozens of worlds using the same pattern. They would arrive with overwhelming force, make threats and demands, and then negotiate while their enemies panicked. Most species would try to buy time, hoping for rescue or looking for diplomatic solutions. But humans did not negotiate with pirates. They did not waste time with diplomatic solutions. They identified threats and eliminated them with brutal efficiency. Admiral Choi watched his tactical display as the battle unfolded. His ships were smaller and less heavily armed than the pirate vessels. But they had advantages that could not be measured in tonnage or firepower. They had crews who trusted each other completely. They had captains who made decisions in seconds, not hours. They had a cause worth dying for. The second pirate ship tried to break away from the battle. Its captain had seen enough human tactics to realize this was not going to be a normal engagement. But Commander Oh Na-young was ready for this move. Her fighters swarmed around the fleeing vessel like angry wasps. The pirate shields were designed to stop big weapons fired from long range. They were not built to handle dozens of small fighters attacking from point-blank distance. The human pilots flew so close they could see through the enemy viewports. Captain Song Tai-hyung made his move when the pirates were distracted by the fighter attack. He brought the Busan Lightning straight at the largest enemy ship on a collision course. His crew thought he had lost his mind, but they trusted him enough to follow orders. At the last possible second, Song ordered maximum thrust and turned his ship sideways. The Busan Lightning scraped along the pirate hull, firing every weapon it had. The enemy armor cracked and split under the point-blank barrage. Vex Karoth could not believe what he was seeing. The human destroyer had just performed a maneuver that should have been suicide. Instead of dying, it had crippled his flagship and was already moving to attack. Another target. "This is madness," he screamed into his communicator. "They fight like wild animals with no regard for proper tactics or self-preservation, but the humans were not fighting like animals. They were fighting like humans. They saw a problem that needed solving, and they solved it in the most direct way possible. The fact that it terrified their enemies was just a bonus. Lieutenant Colonel Park. Hiram felt her ship shudder as it made contact with the damaged pirate vessel. Her Marines were already moving toward the airlocks, ready to board the enemy ship. They carried weapons and armor, but their most dangerous tool was their willingness to fight room by room if necessary. The pirate crew was not prepared for boarders. Most Galactic species considered boarding actions to be primitive and uncivilized. Modern warfare was supposed to be conducted at long range with proper protocols and honor codes. The human Marines did not care about honor codes. They cared about stopping pirates from murdering innocent people. They moved through the enemy ship like a force of nature, taking prisoners when possible and eliminating resistance when necessary. Admiral Choi received reports from all his ships. The battle was going better than expected. The pirates were confused and demoralized by tactics they had never encountered. Their ships were heavily damaged, and their crews were beginning to panic. The mining colony defense coordinator Vel SSH watched the battle from his command center. He had expected a siege that would last for weeks. Instead, he was seeing the Crimson Fleet torn apart in a matter of hours. "This is impossible," he whispered to his aide. "The humans are outnumbered and outgunned. How are they winning?" His aide was a young Altarian who had studied human military history. "They do not fight to win according to the rules," she said. "They fight to win, period." The third pirate ship tried to surrender when its captain realized the battle was lost. But Admiral Choi had seen too many fake surrenders from pirates. He ordered his ships to continue the attack until all enemy vessels were completely destroyed. By the time the shooting stopped, the Crimson Fleet was nothing but floating wreckage. The human fleet had taken damage, but no ships were lost. The Marines had captured dozens of pirates and recovered stolen goods from multiple raids. The mining world was safe. 2 million people would go to sleep that night without fear of death. the human fleet began. Patrol patterns around the system, while damage control teams worked to repair battle damage. Admiral Choi sent a simple message to the Galactic Council. The pirate threat has been eliminated. Colony is secure. Human fleet returning to patrol duties. Did not ask for praise. He did not request formal recognition. He did not even mention the casualties they had inflicted on the enemy. It was just another day at work for humanity. But across the galaxy, other species were watching the battle recordings. With amazement and fear, the humans had just rewritten the rules of warfare in 6 hours. They had shown that sometimes action was more important than authorization. The age of endless committee meetings and careful negotiations was about to end. The news spread through the galactic communication networks faster than light itself. On thousands of worlds, alien species watched the battle recordings with their mouths open and their minds struggling to understand what they had just seen. 12. Human ships had destroyed 3 massive pirate vessels in 6 hours without asking anyone for permission. Dr. Han Minji was having breakfast on the research station New Centauri when her alien colleague Vex Tar burst into the dining hall. The creature had 4 eyes that could move in different directions, and right now all of them were staring at the data pad in his tentacles. "You have to see this," Vex Tar said, his voice shaking with excitement or fear. Dr. Han could not tell which. "Your people just broke every rule of civilized warfare." Dr. Han took the datapad and watched the battle footage. She saw Commander Oh Na-young dive her fighters straight into enemy fire without hesitation. She watched Captain Song Tai-hyung ram his destroyer along the pirate hull while firing every weapon. She saw human marines boarding enemy ships like ancient pirates themselves. "This is impossible," Vex Tar continued. "They did not request permission from their government. They did not file the proper military action forms. They did not even challenge the pirates to honorable combat. They just started shooting." Dr. Han smiled as she handed back the datapad. "That is exactly what humans do when innocent people are in danger. We act first and worry about paperwork later." But how can they make such important decisions without authorization? Vex Tar asked, his eyes spinning in confusion. What if they made a mistake? What if the situation was more complicated than it appeared? Then we would have dealt with those complications after saving 2 million lives. Dr. Han replied, "Simply, the most important thing was stopping the pirates. Everything else could be figured out later." Across the research station, other humans were having similar conversations with their alien friends and colleagues. The concept of independent action was so foreign to most galactic species that they could barely understand it. Professor Lee Sang-hyun taught xenobiology at the Galactic University on Core Prime. His specialty was studying how different species made decisions in crisis situations. For years, he had published papers about human initiative and independence, but most aliens thought it was just theoretical research. Now his office was packed with alien students and faculty, members who wanted to understand what they had just witnessed on Kepler 442b. The holographic display showed the battle from multiple angles, and everyone was talking at once. Professor Lee, "Your species attacked without proper authorization," said Dean Moore Cath, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "How is this possible in a civilized society, Professor?" Lee stood up and pointed to the display. "Because sometimes civilization requires people to act quickly rather than slowly," he said. "When pirates are about to murder 2 million innocent beings, there is no time for committees and authorization requests. But what about the chain of command?" asked a student whose species looked like walking trees. "What about proper military procedure? What about following orders?" The chain of command authorized Captain Lee Minho to protect innocent life. Professor Lee explained that authorization does not require additional paperwork when lives are at stake. As for following orders, his orders were to keep the peace. Stopping pirates is keeping the peace, a nebuloid professor whose gaseous form shimmered with confusion raised a tentacle like appendage. But this could lead to chaos, she said. If everyone makes their own decisions without proper approval, how can society function? Professor Lee smiled. It functions by having people who are willing to do the right thing, even when it is difficult or dangerous. He said, our society works because individuals take responsibility instead of hiding behind bureaucracy. The alien students and professors looked at each other with something like fear in their eyes. For thousands of years, galactic civilization had been built on careful procedures, elaborate authorization systems, and the absolute requirement to get permission before taking any significant action. The human approach threatened everything they believed about how society should work. Meanwhile, on the Altarian homeworld, High Counselor Vash was holding an emergency meeting. With his military advisors, the ancient blue-skinned alien was trying to understand how such a small human force had defeated a pirate fleet that had terrorized his sector for years. General Keth Rin, who commanded the Altarian Defense Force, was studying the tactical recordings with growing amazement. The human ships moved with coordination that should have taken months of training, but Admiral Choi had only 12 ships in his command. How did they achieve such perfect coordination? Keth Rin asked. They had no time to plan this attack, no opportunity to rehearse these maneuvers, yet they fought like they had been practicing together for years. High Counselor Vash was more concerned with the political implications. This sets a dangerous precedent, he said. If species can simply ignore council authority and take military action whenever they choose, we will have chaos and war throughout the galaxy. But Sir Keth Rin pointed out respectfully, the humans saved 2 million lives, including many Altarian civilians. Our own bureaucratic processes would have taken weeks to authorize any military response. That is not the point, Vash replied angrily. The point is that proper procedures exist for a reason. They prevent rash actions. They ensure all options are considered. They maintain the stability that has kept peace in the galaxy for centuries on the Zentaurian hive worlds. Queen Zek Lash was discussing the battle with her military advisors. The insect-like species had always prided themselves on perfect organization and absolute obedience to authority. The human actions seemed like madness to their ordered minds. The individual human commanders made tactical decisions without consulting their superiors, reported General Shivnek, his compound eyes reflecting the light from multiple screens. They adapted their battle plans in real time without requesting permission to change their orders. This is completely contrary to proper military doctrine. Queen Zek Lash clicked. In her language, the chain of command exists to ensure that all decisions are made by qualified officers with complete information. How can individual captains possibly have enough knowledge to make strategic decisions? Yet they won. General Hive Knock pointed out 3 pirate ships destroyed 12 human vessels unharmed, 2 million civilians rescued. The results speak for themselves regardless of their methods. The Queen fell silent. This was exactly what worried her. If individual initiative could achieve better results than proper command structure. What did that say about the Zentaurian military system? Dr. Han Minji found herself answering more and more questions about human psychology and decision-making. Her alien colleagues seemed desperate to understand how humans could function without the elaborate authorization systems that governed every other species. We make mistakes. Sometimes, she admitted to a group of researchers gathered in her laboratory, but we would rather make mistakes while trying to help people than make no mistakes while people die. Waiting for our help, a vegan scientist whose species had never fought a war in their recorded history asked, "But how do you prevent individuals from making terrible decisions that harm innocent people?" Dr. Han considered the question carefully. "We teach our children to think about consequences," she said. "We raise them to care about other people. We give them principles to guide their actions when they cannot ask for help." What if their principles are wrong? The vegan persisted. What if they act with good intentions but cause great harm? Then we accept responsibility for those mistakes and try to do better next time. Dr. Han replied, "The alternative is to never act at, all which guarantees that we will never help anyone." The alien researchers exchanged glances. This conversation was challenging everything they believed about how intelligent beings should behave in a complex society back on the mining world of Kepler. 442B Defense Coordinator Vel SSH was trying to write his report on the incident. He had been preparing for a siege that could last months. His people had supplies, weapons, and protocols for every possible scenario except the one that had actually happened. How do I report that the entire crisis was resolved in 6 hours? He asked his aide. The council will think I am making up stories. Perhaps, sir, his aide suggested you should simply report the facts. The human fleet engaged the pirates. The pirates were defeated, the colony is safe, but they had no authorization, Vel SH protested. They did not follow any of the established protocols for requesting military assistance. They just showed up and started shooting. Maybe, sir, his aide said quietly. That is why they were able to save us. Vel SSH stared at his aide for a long moment. The young Altarian had spent her career following every rule and regulation in the military handbook. Now she was suggesting that breaking rules might actually be better than following them. The galaxy was changing, and the old ways of doing things were starting to look foolish compared to the human approach. The age of endless committees and careful authorization was being challenged by species that valued action over procedure. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. The battle was not supposed to end so quickly. Captain Song Tae-hyung stood on the bridge of his destroyer Busan Lightning and watched the wreckage of the pirate fleet floating in space around him. 6 hours ago, 3 massive warships had been preparing to destroy a peaceful mining colony. Now they were nothing but scrap metal and expanding clouds of gas. Every tactical manual in the galaxy said that smaller forces should avoid direct confrontation with larger enemies. The proper strategy was to harass the enemy, maintain distance, and wait for reinforcements. Captain Song had read those manuals and then ignored every word. His ship had taken damage from the insane maneuver he had performed. The armor was cracked in 12 places, and 2 of his weapon systems were offline. But his crew was alive. The colony was safe, and the pirates were dead. That seemed like a fair trade to him. Lieutenant Commander Kim Ji-soo. His tactical officer was running damage assessments and casualty reports, sir, she said. We have 17 wounded crew members, but no deaths. The medical bay reports all injuries are minor. Song nodded and opened a communication channel to Admiral Choi. Sir, the Busan Lightning is still operational. We can continue patrol duties, if needed. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but satisfied. Well done, Captain. Your attack on the flagship turned the entire battle in our favor. It was not strategy, sir. Song admitted honestly. I just got angry, watching them threaten innocent people. Sometimes the best plan is to hit the enemy harder than they expect. Admiral Choi smiled. That is exactly the kind of thinking that wins wars, Captain. The pirates expected us to follow their rules, but we have our own rules, Lieutenant. Colonel Park Hye-aram was leading her Marines through the captured sections of the largest pirate ship. Her soldiers had secured the vessel in record time, but what they found inside made her sick to her stomach. The pirates had been carrying cargo, holds full of stolen goods and captured civilians from previous raids. Sergeant Major Oh Jung-kook approached with a report. Colonel, we have found 43 prisoners from 7 different species. They have been held in terrible conditions for weeks, Park. Hye-aram felt her anger burning hotter. How many pirates are still alive? She asked. 15. Sir. They surrendered when they realized they could not fight us in close quarters. Most of their crew was killed during the ship-to-ship battle. Good, Park Hye-aram said coldly. Make sure the prisoners get medical attention immediately. As for the surviving pirates, they can explain their crimes to a military tribunal. The human approach to boarding actions was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Most species considered such tactics to be primitive and barbaric. Modern warfare was supposed to be conducted at long distance with minimal casualties and maximum honor. But human Marines did not care about honor when they were fighting slavers and murderers. They moved through enemy ships, like forces of nature taking control of critical systems and eliminating resistance with brutal efficiency. The pirates had never faced opponents who were willing to fight room by room, corridor by corridor until the entire ship was captured on the Mining World Defense Coordinator. Vel SAH was trying to understand what had just happened. His defense plans had anticipated a siege lasting months. He had prepared evacuation protocols, casualty treatment centers, and supply distribution systems for a long, desperate fight. Instead, the entire crisis had been resolved before his people even finished moving to their emergency positions. Colonel Nam Do-hyun commanded the human ground forces stationed on the mining world. He had been preparing his soldiers for urban combat against pirate raiders when the space battle ended. Now he was helping coordinate relief efforts for the rescued prisoners. Vel SSH approached him with obvious confusion. "Colonel, your fleet just accomplished something that should have been impossible," he said. "3 pirate ships destroyed in 6 hours, no human casualties, minimal damage to your vessels. How is this possible?" Nam Do-hyun was checking inventory lists for medical supplies, but he looked up to answer the question. "We fight to win, sir," he said simply. "We do not fight to follow rules or look honorable. We identify threats and eliminate them as quickly and efficiently as possible, but the tactical manuals say that overwhelming force should always triumph." Vel SH protested. "Your ships were outnumbered and outgunned by a significant margin. The tactical manuals assume that both sides are following the same rules." Nam Do-hyun replied. "The pirates expected negotiation delay, tactics, and careful maneuvering. They got human Marines shooting first and asking questions. Later, Commander." Oh Na-young was refueling her fighter squadron on the Soul's Pride. Her pilots were exhausted but triumphant. They had performed maneuvers that would have been considered suicidal by any military academy in the galaxy, and somehow all of them had survived. Her wing commander, Lieutenant Jin Seok-jin, approached with flight status reports. "Ma'am, all 24 fighters are operational. We took some hits, but nothing that cannot be repaired." Oh Na-young nodded. "Good work, everyone." She opened a communication channel to address all her pilots. "You flew like demons today," she said. "I am proud to serve with each of you, but remember, this is what we trained for. This is why we exist, to protect innocent people from those who would harm them." The fighter pilots cheered. Their average age was 23, and most of them had never seen real combat before today. But they had flown into battle against impossible odds because their commanders asked them to, and because people needed their help. This was another thing that confused alien military observers. Human pilots were incredibly young by galactic standards. Most alien species did not trust important military decisions to anyone under 50 years old. But humans regularly put 20-year-olds in charge of advanced fighter craft and expected them to make life and death decisions in seconds. Admiral Choi was composing his after-action report for Earth Command. The battle had been a complete success, but he knew the political consequences were just beginning. The Galactic Council would demand explanations, investigations, and probably sanctions against humanity. He did not care. The mining colony was safe. His people had performed their duties with honor, and the galaxy was a slightly better place because 12 human ships had been willing to fight when fighting was necessary. Captain Lee Minho was in his ready room reviewing casualty reports from all the human ships, 0 dead, 17 wounded across the entire fleet. It was an almost miraculous result considering they had just fought 3 ships that should have been able to destroy them easily. His communication officer knocked on the door and entered. "Sir, we are receiving messages from the Galactic Council. They are demanding immediate explanations for our unauthorized military action." Lee Minho deleted the messages without reading them. Let them demand. He said, "We will answer their questions when we have time, after we finish making sure the colony is secure and the prisoners are cared for." The concept of putting humanitarian concerns ahead of political protocol was revolutionary in galactic society. Most species would have immediately begun preparing elaborate explanations and justifications for their actions. The humans simply continued doing their jobs. Dr. Han Minji received a priority message from her supervisor at the Galactic University requesting her immediate return to help explain human behavior to alien colleagues. The message made it clear that the entire academic community was in an uproar over the battle. She composed a brief reply explaining that she was busy, helping treat the rescued prisoners, and would return when her medical duties were complete. Her supervisor would not understand this priority system, but Dr. Han did not care. The rescued prisoners were mostly civilians who had been captured during previous pirate raids. They included families from half a dozen different species, and many of them had been held for weeks under terrible conditions. They needed medical attention, food, clean water, and psychological support. These needs were more important than academic conferences or political explanations. The humans understood this instinctively. Other species apparently needed to have it explained to them. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, the emergency session was still ongoing. Alien representatives were arguing about precedents, procedures, and the proper responses to unauthorized military actions. Meanwhile, the human fleet was already back on patrol duty, protecting other worlds in the sector. Ambassador Kim Soo-young listened to the debates with growing impatience. Finally, she stood up and activated her communication system. "Honored counselors," she said, "while you debate the proper procedures for responding to pirate attacks, my people are out there stopping actual pirates. Real people are alive today because we acted quickly. I suggest you spend less time arguing about our methods and more time learning from our results." The chamber fell silent. This was exactly the kind of direct speaking that made other species uncomfortable. But it was also exactly the kind of truth that the galaxy needed to hear. The age of endless committee meetings was ending whether the aliens realized it or not. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 18 hours straight. Representatives from 47 different species packed the crystal chamber, while holographic displays showed the aftermath of the Kepler incident over and over again. The wreckage of 3 pirate ships, the rescued mining colony, and most shocking of all, the human fleet already back on regular patrol duties as if nothing unusual had happened. High Counselor Zeth Ran of the Altarian Federation stood at the center podium, his blue skin pale with exhaustion and fury. "This is completely unacceptable," he declared for the 15th time. "The humans have violated every principle of galactic law. They acted without authorization, without following proper protocols, without even filing the appropriate military action requests." Ambassador Kim Soo-young sat calmly in the human pod, unmoved by the chaos around her. She had been listening to these same complaints for hours while her people continued doing their jobs protecting innocent lives throughout the sector. Counselor Merdak of the Kepler Mining Consortium rose slowly from his crystalline seat. His people had been on that colony. His children had been on that colony, and he was tired of hearing aliens complain about the methods used to save them. "With respect to High Counselor Zeth Ran," he said, his voice echoing strangely through the chamber, "my family members were on that mining world. My people were about to die while this council debated committee structures and authorization procedures. The humans saved them while we argued about paperwork. But the precedent," Zeth Ran interrupted. "If we allow species to take unilateral military action whenever they choose, we will have chaos throughout the galaxy. The Council exists to prevent exactly this kind of reckless behavior." Counselor Merdak turned to face the Altarian leader. "What precedent?" he asked. "The precedent of saving innocent lives. The precedent of acting quickly when action is needed the precedent of putting results ahead of procedures. Young diplomat Yoon Chae-young had been taking notes throughout the entire session. As junior staff, she was not supposed to speak during council debates, but she could not stay silent any longer. She stood up in the human pod and activated her communication system. With respect to the council, she said, her voice clear and strong. Maybe the real question is not why we acted without permission. Maybe the question is why everyone else needs permission to do the right thing. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the translator system seemed to pause as every alien in the room tried to process what they had just heard. It was a question that cut to the heart of galactic civilization. Itself High Counselor Zeth stared at the young human diplomat. The proper procedures exist for a reason. He said, they prevent wars. They ensure that all options are considered. They maintain the stability that has kept peace in our galaxy for over 1,000 years. Yoon Chae-young did not back down. And how many innocent people have died during those 1,000 years while committees debated whether to help them? She asked, how many pirates have escaped justice while authorization requests moved through bureaucratic channels? How many colonies have been destroyed while the council argued about proper procedures? Counselor Vex Moore of the Zentarian Hive Mind spoke up, his insect-like features twitching with agitation. The individual. Human commanders made strategic decisions without consulting their superiors. He said they ignored established military doctrine and acted on their own initiative. This violates everything we know about proper command structure, but it worked. Pointed out Counselor Yeltash of the Vegan Assembly. 3 pirate ships destroyed, 0 human casualties, 2 million civilians rescued in 6 hours. Your established military doctrine would have taken months to achieve the same result, if it could achieve it at all. The debate continued, but something had changed in the chamber. For the first time in centuries, species were questioning whether their careful bureaucracy was actually protecting anyone. The human approach had proven that sometimes action was more important than authorization. Ambassador Kim Soo-young finally stood to address the council directly. She had been waiting for the right moment to speak, and that moment had arrived, honored counselors. She said, I understand your concerns about proper procedures and authorization protocols. But while you debate the rules, innocent people are dying. Every minute we spend arguing about whether we had the right to save lives is a minute we could spend saving more lives. High Counselor Zeth tried to interrupt, but Kim Soo-young continued. You created this council to maintain peace and protect the innocent, she said. But your procedures have become more important to you than the people you were supposed to protect. You would rather let pirates murder civilians than risk making a decision without proper committee approval. The silence that followed was deafening. Several alien species had never heard anyone speak so directly to the council leadership. Most of them were shocked by the human diplomat's blunt words, but some were beginning to nod in agreement. Counselor Det Rim of the Andromedian Trade Federation spoke up hesitantly. The human ambassador raises an uncomfortable point. He said, how many times have we watched crises unfold while waiting for proper authorization? How many opportunities to help have we lost because we were too afraid of making mistakes? General Keth Rin of the Altarian Defense Force had been studying tactical recordings from the battle. His military mind was fascinated by human combat effectiveness, regardless of the political implications. The human fleet achieved perfect coordination without months of training. He reported, they adapted their battle plans in real time without requesting permission to change their orders. Their individual ship commanders made tactical decisions that would require full staff meetings in our military. How is this possible? Demanded. Queenzek Lash of the Zentarian forces. General Keth Rin looked uncomfortable. They trust their people to make good decisions, he said. They give their commanders broad authority to act within general guidelines rather than requiring specific authorization for every action. This concept was revolutionary to most alien military. Establishments. The idea of trusting individual officers to make important decisions without consulting higher authority was almost unthinkable. Professor Noel Vach of the Galactic Military Academy had been analyzing human training methods and command structure for years. His research was suddenly in high demand as military leaders tried to understand how such a small force had achieved such decisive victory. The humans train their officers to think independently, he explained. They encourage initiative and reward creative problem-solving. Most galactic militaries punish deviation from established doctrine, but humans actively seek out new approaches to old problems. But what about coordination? Demanded Admiral Hex Ron of the Altarian fleet. How can individual units work together effectively if they are all making independent decisions? Professor Noel Vach displayed tactical recordings from the battle showing human ships working in perfect harmony despite the apparent chaos of their approach. They share common goals and principles, he said. Their individual decisions all support the same overall objective, even without centralized control. The military officers in the chamber studied the recordings with growing amazement. The human fleet had moved like a single organism, despite having no time for coordination or planning. Each ship had made independent tactical decisions that perfectly supported what other ships were doing. Back on Earth, Admiral Park Jinwoo was reviewing reports. From the Kepler incident in his office at Fleet Command Headquarters, he had been expecting political fallout from the unauthorized military action. But the tactical results were exactly what he had hoped for. His aide, Captain Seo Ji-hyun, entered with the latest communications from the Galactic Council. Sir, the aliens are demanding explanations, investigations, and formal apologies for our actions. Admiral Park deleted the messages without reading them. Let them demand, he said, our people did. Their jobs protected innocent lives and came home safely. That is all the explanation I need to give. Captain SEO looked concerned. Sir, the Council is threatening sanctions against humanity. They want to restrict our military operations in contested sectors. Then they will learn that sanctions work both ways. Admiral Park replied, the galaxy needs our protection more than we need their approval. When the next crisis comes and their committee meetings fail to save anyone, they will remember why. Human ships are welcome everywhere. The political consequences were just beginning, but the tactical implications were already spreading through military academies across the galaxy. Young officers were studying human battle tactics and asking uncomfortable questions about why their own forces moved so slowly and required so much authorization. The galaxy was changing whether the Galactic Council wanted it to or not. The age of endless debate was ending, and the age of decisive action was about to begin. 6 months after the Kepler incident, as historians were already calling it, the effects were still spreading through the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Admiral Choi De-sung had become the most famous human in space, though he insisted he was just doing his job. Captain Lee Min-ho commanded a new rapid response task force specifically designed for emergency situations. But the real changes were happening inside the Galactic Council itself. High Counselor Zeth Ran stood before the Reformed Defense Committee looking older and more tired than anyone had ever seen him. The Altarian leader had spent months fighting against the new emergency protocols, but even he could not ignore the results. The humans have responded to 14 crises in the past 6 months, he reported reluctantly. Each time they acted immediately without waiting for council authorization. Each time they achieved their objectives with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. Counselor Merdak leaned forward in his crystalline seat. And how many crises did our traditional methods handle during the same period? He asked. Zeth Ran paused before answering. 3, he admitted, and 2 of those required follow-up actions because our initial response was too slow to be effective. The numbers spoke for themselves. The human approach of acting first and requesting permission later was saving more lives and solving more problems than centuries of careful bureaucracy. Commander Oh Na-young now led the rapid response. Wing, a joint human-alien unit that could deploy within hours instead of months. Her pilots came from 6 different species, but they all trained using human tactics and human decision-making processes. Lieutenant Kang Yesul was her newest pilot, a young woman who had volunteered to transfer from traditional fleet duties to the new rapid response system. She was flying patrol in the Vega sector when the next crisis began. Commander sensors are showing a plague ship drifting toward the Centauri colonies. Yesul reported, "No response to communications, and the ship appears to be carrying a deadly virus." Nayong made the decision in seconds. "All wings converge on my position," she ordered. "We quarantine that ship before it reaches populated space." No committee meetings, no authorization requests, no delays. The multi-species task force moved with.